Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, the ups and downs, and how to navigate life with kids on your own while keeping sane. Covering subjects such as domestic violence through to fussy eaters and solo dating. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest is a certified parent educator, bringing over 30 years of expertise in the parenting education field and through her business, Positive Parenting. She has helped many parents go from despair to hope with practical, hands-on ideas. Simply put, she helps parents regain control of their homes and break the vicious cycle of yelling all day at their children through my Positive Parenting philosophies. Well, amen, and thank God for that. That's what I need, is to stop this vicious cycle of yelling at my kids all day, especially after we've been in lockdown for the last 5 months. Awesome. Hi, Debbie. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Claire. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great. Hey, so look, wow. We've spoken previously, and you've had a journey to get to where you are today and get to the Positive Parenting company, the business that you've got. So, hey, tell us a little bit about the last 30 years of parenting education, because blimey, I'm sure that's been educating children's hard enough, but educating their parents is probably doubly hard.
I don't know. I mean, my dream was to help kids, and I don't even work directly with kids. I work with the parents, but it turns out that's the most effective way to help children, is to help their parents be better communicators with them. That just is part of my passion and how I think I got here. And basically what happened was I was in a battered women's shelter 30 years ago. I had 3 little kids. Wow. They were 1, 2, and 6. And without going into all the gory details of it, it was in the battered women's shelter where I had my first parenting class. And they said, you can't spank your kids. And it's like, what? How am I going to discipline my kids? Because I equated the two, as most people do. And
it was 30 years ago at the end of the day. And I know when I was a kid, and I was 30 years ago. So, yeah, it was a long, long time ago. You did. My mum had a God lover. She would cringe for me saying this, but she had a little stick that she used to rap us over the hands if we were really naughty. I never got it, but my brother got it once. She only had to threaten it. But
yeah, no,
right.
I mean, I was spanked with the belt with wooden spoons. I mean, that was normal back then. And so the point they were making was that I was in there because of violence, and violence begets violence. And I was very young. I was in my mid 20s, and, I don't know any better. And so it was just quite a awakening for me. And I was concerned, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. How am I going to discipline my kids? And the one really sweet shelter worker, she's like, if you feel like you need to spank, just come and get me and we'll talk it through. And the first day I was like, 7 or 8 times, Abby, he's doing this and this and this. What do I do now? And Abby, she's doing this. And every time we would talk it through what my child was doing and what my options were of how I could respond. And after about a week, I started calling for her less and less. And suddenly I realized no matter what the situation is, I can always do something better than spanking or yelling. There's always some more effective way to discipline my child that helps them be better, do better, corrects their behavior, and builds their self-esteem and doesn't harm them physically and cause fear, which we now know using fear-based discipline, using fear to discipline our children is counterintuitive and countereffective. It doesn't work. So when you cause a child to be afraid, yelling at them, spanking them, it causes them to go into fight or flight. And that sets off a huge biochemical response, a cascade of hormones, stress hormones, and it shuts down their thinking brain. Humans are set up to go into fight or flight to escape danger, like a tiger. And that's what fear does to us. It sets up the fight or flight response. And so if we use that to discipline our children, we're not engaging their thinking brain. We're only engaging their instinctive nature, their base brain. And so it's not helping us in the long run. They're not learning to do things for the right reasons and the higher thinking. And so it's really counter to what we want in the long run for them. So anyway, I was in that shelter. And when I got out, I was just like, I put together a parenting breakfast club, and I had Abby come and teach us little lessons. My neighbors and I would get together, and somebody would provide the coffee and donuts, and we each chipped in $5. And that's how I started. Like, I was putting together my neighbors and doing this. And then I finally got out of that relationship. I was actually in the shelter 2 other times. So 3 times total over a year before I got out. I know. Now I have 3 small children. I'm working full time. I'm a single parent and barely making it. And I was doing volunteer work for the shelter and for another organization that was closely related called Child Abuse and Neglect. And that was just part of my personal journey of healing and getting through.
And we all, mine's slightly different to yours, but we all have different journeys, and we all find ourselves in that single parentdom where, we're sitting there trying to be mum and dad to, you had 3 kids, I've got 1 child, and it's all about surviving. And it's quite interesting that you said, it was really funny. I've just come off a phone conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about the fact that how our lives were different previous to children, and the fact that we're now both single parents trying to struggle through what we're trying to get through. And it's just it's weird, and I'm sure these journeys are there to bring us to positive parenting. So if you hadn't have dealt with what you dealt with 30 years ago, you wouldn't be here doing what you're doing now, maybe.
No, probably not, because I through the volunteer work, I realized I love this work, and through the classes that I took, because I took a couple different parenting classes, and at one point I was working full time in a law firm as a receptionist, making like $8 an hour, or $10 an hour, or something crazy. Yeah. And I just said, God, give me work that I love, that makes a difference in the world, and that lets me be home after school for my kids. Because I that was really important. And this parenting thing kind of all unfolded. And it took me about a year and a half. I weaned myself off of that job as I started my business teaching parenting. And after about a year and a half, I started making enough money that I got my dream. I got to stay home, be after school for my children, and was doing work that I loved and that made a difference in the world. And so, for me, that was just my making lemonade, I guess, out of lemons is what they say. But it really did lead me to my life's work. And part of the parenting class, I teach people about what do you want your children to learn about making mistakes, and how to do that. And for me, the biggest mistake I ever made, which was marrying the wrong person, it turned out to be my greatest gift. It led me to my life's work. Yeah. So how do I say, I don't have regrets because of that? Like it was meant to be my path.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. I mean, like I said, with this conversation this morning, you do sit there and go, God, geez, that revolving door as such. And you think, well, how different my life could have been. But, if I had have chosen a different partner, same with you, if you chosen a different partner, you wouldn't actually be, the world is obviously moving you in a direction that it needs to nudge you in.
I think so.
Or you need to learn a lesson or something. And I've sort of learned in the last 2 or 3 years to just sit in it and just let it move me where it wants to move me. And I suppose it's moved me into creating a podcast. God knows where this goes, but I'm really enjoying it because I talk to interesting people like you and understand and learn things myself about what needs to happen to stop me yelling at my kid. So moving on through, so then you set up positive parenting?
I was working with the things that I had learned in the parenting classes that I had taken, both in the shelter and out of the shelter.
Yeah.
And it was probably about a year later. And I can just say that from the time I was in the shelter where I stopped spanking, and when all that occurred, I was like, I'm not spanking my kids anymore. I mean, I made a decision. A lot of people say, I'll only use spanking as a last resort. But if you use spanking as a last resort, by the nature of that statement, kids' job is to push you to your limit. So if your limit is spanking, they're always going to push you there. So for me, it's important, if you decide not to spank, that you really take it out and say, I'm not willing to, no matter what. I'll figure out something else to do, because otherwise they'll push you to it. And so I had stopped spanking, and I had all these tools. I mean, that's the fun thing about parenting classes. Once a parent, if whoever's listening, if you've never taken a parenting class, take one. They're all different. They're all super fun. You'll learn something great in each one. And some of the stuff you'll have to leave behind, because not everybody agrees with everything, obviously. And we shouldn't. We should have lots of different perspectives to draw from and choose what's right for us and for our family and our children.
Well, our kids are different,
yes,
aren't
very
they, at the
much
end of the day? And we're all different, completely different human beings. You're different from me and my background and where I've come from, and our kids will be different.
And our values are different. And I think that's, to me, more than anything, the most important thing. In my class, there's a session where I help parents uncover their top 10 values. And I always say, I like the parents to read those, because all of us are different. We have different things that we value. And I like to tell parents, I'm not here to give you your values. That's up to you. But what I'm here to do is help you get to your values, to see how are you shooting your own foot and achieving the values that you state that you want for your children. Because there's many ways that we parents, something as simple as, most parents put on their list of values honesty. Like, truthfulness is a huge value for most parents. Most parents do things like, keep the extra change somebody gives, or tell them I'm not here, or, there's all these little subtle ways that we model going against our own values that we say that we want to teach our children. Yeah. And so when one of the points I wanted to make about yelling, because that's where this started, is I stopped spanking and I stopped yelling. And about 7 months after I took my first class, I don't remember what was going on. I was probably overtired and hadn't been doing enough self-care or whatever. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I yelled at my son. And this, he's like a year and a half, maybe, almost maybe 20 months old at the time. I forget. And I yelled, and I look over at him, and he has his hands over his ears, and he's squinching his eyes shut, and he's cringing. And it's like, oh my gosh, that yelling hurts him. And when I was yelling all the time, like, kids just tune us out, numb it out, blow it off. They don't feel it. But when I wasn't doing it continually, I could see the impact it had on him. And that, more than anything else, motivated me. When I saw that physical pain at me yelling, that gave me the motivation to try even harder, to keep providing myself with tools and doing things so that I didn't get to that point.
Yeah. See, I'm a yeller, and my son will laugh, because I'm a yeller. I've never spanked him, smacked him, done anything with him.
Good
I may have grabbed his arm and pulled him into his bedroom to give him time out. But I've tried I've not done any physical. But the thing is, like you say, like, he's yelling, especially if you've said to them 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 times, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Please go and do X. And then you just get to a point where you're busy at work, or you'll be, and especially, I've been 5 months homeschooling, working from home in a lockdown in Melbourne. So, there are times where buttons get pushed and you go, oh my God, just please do what the teachers asked you to do, or whatever. And I know I shouldn't be yelling. I know it's not the most positive thing to do, but it is my go-to. So what can I do now to stop this yelling? Because I desperately want to stop yelling at my child. And there are times where I just go, right, I'm going to take myself off, deep breath, take myself off. And I actually get him and me to sit and breathe together to calm each other down, because he gets het up So it's like we're bouncing off each other. And so what 3 things can we do right now to stop me
one
yelling?
is to track and notice. I would actually keep a log or a journal and jot down notes about when you yell, because what you want to do is look for patterns. That'll be the first thing. And what do you notice? I mean, just off the top of your head, Claire, what do you think is one of the triggers for you? Like, what do you think? When do you think you're most likely to yell?
Probably at that time of the month.
But it is because that's a good thing to know.
I know when I'm getting to that time of the month, because my fuse is so much more shorter. So, it might be that, normally I would just patiently be saying, but then, and there's look, thank God for my child, it's only a couple of days a week, but a month, sorry, not a week. But, normally I'm very calm and I'll keep it together, but then there's, my fuse 2 days.
This is great. Yeah. So this is great. So that's the setup for you, that's a time where you're vulnerable to this. So the first thing is making that commitment to yourself. Like you've just said it. I don't like doing this. I don't want to be a yeller. And so telling myself, I'm not going to yell no matter what. And being willing to mess up. You won't be perfect. If you mess up and yell, that's okay. You've made a mistake, but to be clear in your mind that you really want this. Because I think some parents are like, I don't think yelling's bad. I mean, it's like I get to the end of my rope, and so, but I hear you saying you don't like it, and for me,
I know it's bad. And I think, and thank you for saying what you said, because I think we have to actually really emphasize, you're not going to be perfect.
Definitely not
straight away, people. And I have been trying for some time. So I know it's bad because my son equates mummy yelling as mummy doesn't love him, right? I don't know. And it got when I first heard about it, it gutted me, because I'm like, oh, no. You are the most important thing in my life. However, kids take on board all of that. It's all about me. So if mummy's yelling at me, she must be unhappy with me and must not love me because she's angry at me and all of these things. And so I'm really cognizant that yelling is not the most constructive thing. He does take it on board and he does go, it's all about me. So mummy's yelling at me because she's not happy. And
you don't mean to say, I don't love you. And that's not what you're saying, but that's how he's misinterpreting it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because most of the time, mummy doesn't yell and mummy is all cuddles and hugs and stuff like that. And then when mummy goes, oh my God. Yeah, he knows mummy's, but he doesn't, because he's so, he's 6 now, but he didn't know that it's just because I've asked you 5 times to blimmin' do X, Y, and Z.
Okay. So, right. So what we're talking about is figuring out those triggers. And for you, that time of the month. For some people, a lot of people say it's when they're run down or they're overtired or they're hungry.
Definitely.
And there's usually a physical component to this, which is all of these. And so knowing that, the number one thing to help us avoid yelling and be a better parent across the board in every way is doing the things to take care of ourselves. And I know we hear this all the time.
Oh, you do? Yes.
And I have a podcast too, the Parenting Pep Talks podcast, these little 3 to 5 minute things. And the lowest listened to one is the one on taking care of yourself. And I don't know how I'm going to change that, but it's like, parents, listen to this, do this, because not just for you. I mean, it's for you, but it's for the purpose of you being a better parent. So if you know that those days are coming, and I'm sure you do, when they're coming, you get to do more things to nurture yourself and to take care of yourself. I knew a therapist who used to take 3 days off every month because she knew she wasn't at her best during those 3 days.
Fantastic.
And so she just scheduled those off. I mean, she just scheduled those off. Now, we can't schedule off being a parent, but you could do some extra nurturing, cut your hours back, do an extra, do something for yourself during that time where you're most vulnerable. And if it really is, I mean, some of us get super hormonal, especially as our kids are getting older and we're going into perimenopause. So seek the support of your doctor. If you really feel, I know a lot of us start feeling super crazy when the perimenopause starts, and even sooner than that, just the cyclical nature of us.
I think I'm just super crazy once a month all the time, and God knows, God help my child with menopause, because I'm on the precipice.
But we've normalized that. Yeah, we've normalized that, but really, Claire, there's a health component to it. And sometimes some extra magnesium or some extra, who knows what it is, herbs. And to be in concert with your doctor and take care of yourself. If you know that we're up mom who, when you haven't eaten, you get extra cranky, keep food around. Always have a snack. And this is true for our children too. I always have snacks when I'm going to pick up kids, because they're always hungry and they're always going to be a wreck. I'm the same way. So I always make sure I've got food around, or I get nuts. If you're overtired, you've got to be patient with yourself. This is the worst time at night, especially for single parents. You're exhausted. Your child needs whatever they need. They're not going to bed, and you have nothing left to give. I mean, that's one of the worst setup times, is that time of night. And so finding ways, to nurture yourself enough to get through those parts of the day.
And look, I completely agree. Like, my son has been waking up at 2 a.m. every single day this week, which has just been exhausting. However, like, some people say, oh, look, he really shouldn't spend, like, he gets up, comes into my room, goes, Mummy, I've had a nightmare, which is not the case, I don't think, at the moment. But like, it is what it is. So I just go, yep, okay, get into bed. So he just gets into my bed, and I put on we've got this, it's a fantastic thing, Moshi Stories. It's the app on the iPad. If you haven't got it, get it, because it's just the one thing he listens to all the time. He's been listening to it for 3 years. You put that on, within like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, he's asleep. And I'm asleep as well. So it's great, because it just lulls me off to sleep as well. And that's what I do. And I know, and like, it's been every night this week. So 4 or 5 nights of him getting into my bed. But as people go, well, he should be going back to his own bed at 6. And I'm like, well, no, because I'm knackered. And that means I've got to get out of my warm bed, get into his bed, cuddle him down. Then when he goes off to sleep, I've got to get out, which is just waking me up again. So exactly like you said, my self-care for me at that point is, no, he just comes and sleeps in my bed for the night. I get some sleep, he gets some sleep, although it's disrupted once.
Well, and here's the thing, what you're saying is so true. And for whatever reason, he's got this new thing going on. You're handling it in the best way for you, which is super important. So you're doing what works for you and works for him. At a certain point, if this becomes a habit that needs to change, what will happen is you'll start being resentful about it. And that's the time where you get to figure out what to do to get him back in his own bed. It's not now. It's not now where he's scared, you're nurturing him, you've got the whole routine out, and you don't mind it, and you both go back to sleep easily. That's perfect. So the way that you as a parent will evaluate these things is by your level of resentment versus being okay. And so anytime a behavior comes up that you're resenting, you're aggravated about, and you talked in the very beginning about telling them to do stuff 10 times, that to me is a signal that we need to sit down and like have an agreement, or I need to rethink what my expectation is. Am I having too high of an expectation of this child, or am I having too low of an expectation of this child, which will also create misbehavior? So I look at the things that aren't working for me as signs and signals that I need to make a change here. And so when things are working well, and I know what I'm doing is nurturing my child, I don't change it. So it's not until that child gets into bed and now you're aggravated and you're agitated and you're short and you're resentful. Now you get to step back and say, okay, Claire, it's time for me to figure out how to get this kid back in his bed, because this ain't working for me anymore.
No, I completely agree. And there are times, and like I said earlier, we've been in lockdown. Well, I've been in lockdown now for 5 months. There are times where I've done exactly what you've said and sat there and gone, okay, this isn't working. So I've had to sit down with him and go, right, this isn't working and mummy doesn't want to yell at you. I don't want you to yell at mummy. So how do we do this differently?
Yes.
So trying to get him to own some of this as well. I know he's 6.
He's 6. So that's a little bit of a big expectation, but you're having the conversations now that are setting the tone and leading the way for later.
And also, if he comes up with some ideas as to, well, how do we solve this, then maybe in him, he feels as though he's had an input into things, which
so important.
Like sometimes it sometimes doesn't work. And sometimes Mary's like, look, just do. But we do. And I am finding, so the massive thing is he's now transitioning back to school because lockdown is going to be finished. Yay, Thursday. Hopefully. And that's the big change. So I think that's the change, and why he's not sleeping is because he's going back to school. So it's different,
makes so much sense. Makes so much sense.
And so I've just had to sit there and go, right, it's going to be for the next 2 weeks. And then once we get back into the routine, we should be okay, hopefully. If we're not, then we need to actually just assess and look at, well, what's going on? Is there things that need to change in his room or whatever? But yeah. So, okay. So just recognize a bit more self-love is what you're saying around those times where get to bed earlier. If you're knackered, get to bed earlier. Go to bed when the kids have gone to bed.
Exactly. And
I sometimes do that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's so important.
If he goes to bed and I go, well, there's no point. Why sit up and watch stuff on TV or whatever? And I'm knackered and I don't really want to work. So, let's just go straight to bed, read a book, and then go to sleep. And it might be 9 o'clock at night or whatever, or 8:30, but I get a night's sleep.
Right. And that's important. Yeah. And so self-care, and then providing yourself with additional tools. So listening to parenting tapes or books, or taking a parenting class, listening to podcasts on parenting like this, and getting ideas. The more ideas that you arm yourself with, the more likely you are to seek a different idea out than yelling or spanking. When you're faced with this situation, the most important thing is that you have ideas to draw from when the child's doing something. So definitely the first step is to take those deep breaths. I'm about to yell. Take a deep breath. Let me see if I could take that cleansing breath and allow a new idea to come in. If you have not armed yourself with ideas because you don't read any parenting books or you don't listen to any parenting tapes, you're only stuck with what you grew up with and what you know. And when you're under stress, your instinct is going to take you back to the most ineffective forms of discipline that you ever learned. I mean, that's just the nature of this thing. And it's how parenting works. Like, our kids are going to trigger and rip off every scab on every wound in us psychologically. And that's just the nature of this beautiful thing of parenting.
And then we're actually going to go from a fight or flight perspective as well then, aren't we? Because we're in a frustrated, angry, button pushed aspect. So we then go back to like what we've known, fight or flight or whatever. And it's very hard to break that dynamic, which I think is what you said earlier. It's very, very important to go, hey, you're not going to be perfect every blooming time.
Right.
This takes work. It is like being a parent is work. It's like being in a relationship with your partner. You're in a relationship with your child. So it's going to take work, and they go through all different stages. God help us when the teenage stage hits. But they go through all these different stages that we have to adapt to and recognize that they're little human beings as well.
And that's a great thing. When you can learn these ideas when they're younger, it arms you and prepares you. I loved having teenagers. To me, that was the most fun time. And I've taken in foster kids before, and I take in teenagers. That's what I love. The little kids, I mean, I love little kids, don't get me wrong. And I have grandkids and I help a lot with them. And little kids, I find super exhausting because you're setting all this framework up, and it takes a lot of self-discipline. It takes a lot of consistency. There's very little positive feedback. They don't say, oh, thank you for providing healthy limits and boundaries for me. Like none of that. No, there's nothing there. No. It's exhausting. Yeah. But what you're doing, and what I did, was bought myself way more on the back end. So when you do positive parenting, which takes so much effort and work when they're young, it buys you way more freedom later, and way more support, and a much better relationship, and everything gets easier and easier. It does not get harder and harder. That's a myth that people that people mistakenly go in thinking that, oh, this is going to be bad because they're going to be teenagers. That's not necessarily true. Teenagers are amazing. They're passionate. They have so much energy. They can do so many things. We're never going to be as passionate again in our lives as we are when we're teenagers about our beliefs. And it's just a beautiful time. And if we know how to navigate that, we can do a much better job of it.
Yes, no, and that's fair enough. Look, I have an amazing son. We were playing Lego the other day, and he turned around and said, "Wow, Mummy, you're such a good helper with this Lego," right? And I was like, "Wow, okay, well, maybe, like, I'm going down the right avenue."
Well, and the thing is, where did he learn to say that? He learned that from you. He's mimicking what he heard from you.
Let's hope so.
Absolutely. No, I can hear that in his voice.
Yeah.
He has a parent who told him, you're a good helper, because he wouldn't have that languaging otherwise. And so they're going to repeat back the things that they would hear from us, good and bad.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And look, he's had all of the aspects of his little life. He was at daycare, and he is at family daycare, and his school is awesome and stuff like that as well. So all of those little aspects help as well. But okay. So trying to recap now. So point 1 has been look after yourself.
Yes.
What else can we do? I've said 3 points, so I'm determined to get these out so I can. Look after yourself, and then
arming ourselves with parenting tools,
and then taking a deep breath.
Taking deep breaths is big, huge. Yeah.
And then so what can we do? So, because I also look at it and go, if you haven't got that relationship with your child, if you're just throwing toys at them or shoving them in front of TV, that doesn't sort of help with the relationship yelling situation with the child either, I'm thinking.
No, and we have a saying, and it's mostly for the teenagers, but it's rules without relationship equals rebellion. So you really have to have connection. You have to have closeness. And so I absolutely agree. We've got to connect with our kids. And when I am going to tell my kids to do something, and I rarely do that. I mean, I teach parents
ways to be
much more more finesseful in that, because if you tell them what to do all day long, they just tune you out. But if I need to make a communication with one of my children, I'm going to actually stop what I'm doing. I'm going to get down on their level. I'm going to touch them, like maybe on their shoulder, or stroke their hair, or some gentle, loving touch. I'm going to look in their eyes, and then I'm going to say, I want you to walk when you're in the house, instead of running around, or whatever the directive is. Yeah. And I'm going to say it one time super clearly and super connected. So that's how I avoid telling them 10 times, which gets me ramped up, which then causes me to go to yelling. So I want to make that connection, because most of the time our kids are running around. You've got a 6-year-old. He's running around. He's down here somewhere at 2 or 3 feet. We're up here at 5 or 6 feet. We're running around, and we're never connecting. We're blah, 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 blah up here, and they're la, 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 way down there. And there's no connection happening. So if you really want your child to listen to you, you got to get on their level. You have to make a physical connection. You have to make eye contact, connection, and a smile on your face if you can. We can win so much cooperation with our smile.
Yeah.
Parents, mothers especially, forget to smile at our children. We get so wrapped up in the aggravation of it all that we run around with this miserable mom face all the time, like scowling. It's like, the mother's scowl.
And we don't mean to.
No, we don't mean to. It's just hard. It's hard. Right. It's not. But let me tell you, Claire, if one of your friends knocks on the door, you open the door and you're like, hi, you have this big smile on your face. Yeah. And you can drum it up for your children. When you're with your children, remember to shine that smile. Nothing will melt their little selves more than mommy's smile. They love to see you happy. And that will provide so much in the way of cooperation, is just remembering to keep it light, have fun, play, smile, enjoy this journey. It does not last that long. I mean, it's done before you know it.
No, I know. I can't believe the 6 years have gone by like they have. Yeah, it is frightening, really, how quickly life goes. And soon, give him another 10 years, and he'll be
I have 5
school
grandkids. Let me tell you.
It's just scary. I cannot believe that we are going to be in November in 10 days' time. 11 days' time. So yeah, it's another year, admittedly another COVID year, but another year that we've just gone through, just like, psh. So yeah, no, I completely agree. So look, okay, so you then, with everything that's gone on, like you've set up the positive parenting, which is, oh my gosh, there's so much you've got on the website that you have, which is positiveparenting.com. You've got you do a podcast, which like gives parents advice and, various different other things. You've got a blog. You do courses as well. There's courses that you've got on there as well.
Yeah, so there's an online self-directed class. So you can go online and just buy that, and it's recorded classes. It used to be just I did classes over the phone, and now I have the Zoom videos up because I did classes during the pandemic as well. So we've got Zoom classes. So you watch those. They're broken up into 44, 20, 30-minute lessons. And so you can watch.
And what do they cover?
Everything.
What
everything regarding discipline and behavior. Everything that you can imagine. We start off with understanding why our children do what they do. So understanding their personality development, what affects it, why, what is sibling rivalry and sibling fighting do with our kids? What is our parental style and what is our parental response? How does that affect their personality development? And then we go into self-esteem and encouragement and everything related to communication, which is what I love, and all the ways that we communicate effectively and ineffectively. And then we talk about the heart of the program, which is understanding why kids misbehave and what to do about it. So a systematic way to approach discipline. Every time our child misbehaves, we can assess why they're misbehaving and then provide corrective measures to that misbehavior. Then we talk about handling feelings, team building, understanding how to, create a really good cohesive team. And then we go into just other, like I do a really fun exercise at the end just to see how we learned everything and how well we can do. Yeah. And so there's just a lot to it. And it definitely will transform parents' world. And, many parents make different decisions. When you realize just how important this is and that this time is limited, you've only got this 15, 20 years where you're doing this.
I know, it's scary.
And so you want to do the best job you can and provide yourself with the best tools that you can. And so that to me, makes it worthwhile. Like, I just want to do the best and just show me. Like, I remember in the shelter, I was so fascinated. It's like, just show me what to do. This opened up a whole new world for me of the way to parent, because I didn't want to yell anymore and I didn't want to spank anymore. But it's like, I didn't know what to do. Just show me what to do. And some of these things are so easy and simple, but none of us know them, or we wouldn't think of them until we learn them.
No, and that's one of the reasons I set this podcast up, is because, well, let's face it, being a parent is blooming hard, right?
Yes.
Being a single parent is blooming hard, right? So, and it's because parenting is hard, right? These little people have their own thoughts, their own views. They do things for certain reasons. They're not being naughty. They're doing things for that reason. And for me, it was about, I needed tools. I needed to speak to people like yourself. I wanted to help people and educate and give them places they could go to get the tools to put in their toolbox so that they could help their children become whole-rounded individuals when they grow up. And my biggest concern when I became a single parent was, everyone said to me, oh, a single parent. Well, that's your kid's future, like down the drain, really, because, single parents of, children who come from broken homes will have all these problems, that they'll be bad at school, they'll be drug addicts, they'll be, they'll abuse, all of these other different things. And I'm like, well, not my kids, because I want to be able to stop that cycle, break that cycle. Look, it's a learning curve. I'm not perfect, by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm trying my best. And I think that's all you can do as any parent, is try your best to try and bring up your person with the least issues, because you can't eradicate all of them, but because they're going to be their interpretation of, they're going to have their own hurts, traumas, whatever. Mummy yelled at me, doesn't love me, and all of those things that I have to deal with myself. But like, yeah, it's about then trying to correct those sort of things and
right, and not being the main source of their trauma. I think that that was definitely part of my motivations for breaking the cycles of different negative parenting that I had learned. And I know for me, that was part of teaching the classes. It's like I was between classes, I would start becoming crazy mom again. Like I taught from this standpoint of we teach best that which we most need to learn. I really needed this. Mm-hmm. And so I was a really good teacher. And, it wasn't until my kids grew up that I was like, oh, no kidding. This is amazing. And now the reason I've become expert at it is because they're grown and I can see, no kidding, this had a great impact. And if it wasn't for this, I don't know where I would be in my relationship with these kids. Yeah. And so I think all parents deserve to give themselves the best that they have to offer their children. And you have to go outside of your own history in order to do that.
Yes, I agree, because I think, like we'd said at the beginning, you've been brought up a certain way and that's the only way that you understand. You've had no other influences within that. And so it's about breaking that cycle as such, understanding yourself, understanding who you are as a person, and being a better person yourself so that your children can then be better little individuals, or not so little individuals as your children are now, grown up with their own kids, but moving forward from there. And look, I love the fact that you're stopping that crazy cycle of yelling at your kids. It's just awesome. So can people contact you via the website if they want to talk to you more?
Via the website for sure.
Do you have Facebook and all of that stuff?
So there's a Facebook page for Positive Parenting. There's Instagram. I'm at Positive Parenting Debbie on Instagram. And cool. I'm out there. And my podcast is Positive Parenting Pep Talks. So it's 3 to 5 minutes a day, just little shots.
Awesome.
Just wake up, listen to the podcast, get a little hit of some inspiration. I do all different topics, different one every day, and they're short. So if you're in a hurry, you've got 5 minutes to listen.
Which is great, because you can be doing the kids' lunches in the morning and have Pop Debbie on.
That's right.
And 3 minutes of wisdom, and you're out the door.
There you
happy
go.
Mum, happy baby.
That's right.
No, that's brilliant. Look, thank you. Thanks ever so much for coming on board and talking to us. I do have one final question, which is, what, Debbie, would your superpower be if you could have one?
It's funny when we were talking about this, and I was thinking about this as you we were wrapping towards the end here. And really what occurred to me is I would love to be able to go inside of everybody and just heal those old wounds that cause us to lose it. I mean, if I could just say you're healed, like that would be I would love to have that superpower. Because I think people, myself included, like I don't try to be a bad parent. I don't try to mess things up, but I have hurt inside, and that's what it came from. And so, I was able to heal me enough through the things that I learned and what I did. And some parents, for whatever reason, don't even know to search for that healing. And so I wish I could just help everybody do that.
Well, I think, in talking to, I've spoken to a lot of people on this podcast, and talking to some of those people, like people are traumatized or, have been through hurtful experiences as a child, but bury that so deep, or, they've been, we have a saying in Australia, it's like, have a cup of concrete and harden up. And it's sort of, although like I used to use it and laugh about it, I don't use it now, but like, it is a bit like that. It's like, harden up, cover it up. And we're in Australia, we're renowned for like, just, she'll be all right. Just, don't deal with it, and deal with it, in that sort of sense, bury it and it'll be fine. If you don't think about it, it'll be okay, and we'll keep going. And globally, I think that's now changing, thank God. And we're now getting away from that.
Yes.
We're now enabling people to open up and I've just recently been watching The Maid on Netflix, which just opened my eyes to it's such an awesome program, but it opened my eyes, and there's a lot of chatter going on about this program on Single Mum Vines and various different other groups out on Facebook, because I've been 4 years out of a relationship that I was in, and I forgot, because in a way I buried it because I've just got on with life, forgot what I went through, and it opened your eyes and you go, wow, okay, I've come a long way in the last 4 years of what was acceptable to me to what isn't acceptable to me now. And it's great. But there was still other stuff that I was needed working through, obviously.
Right. And what happens is the places where we're hurting inside, those are where our children can push our buttons. And I think that's my motivation for wanting to help parents heal that, so that their buttons don't get pushed, so that they don't feel like they have to lose it so much. And then their children will have the benefit of sane mom rather than crazy mom. And that's my dream for everybody. And
I think what you're doing is very good, because although you're working with parents, it's the working with parents, because I think if we fix what we're dealing with as parents, like you've said, it then helps.
Well, kids are perfect.
Children are blank
they're
slates.
Perfect. They're just they're born
slates.
good. They're perfect humans, and there's nothing wrong with them. And so when I get a parent who wants me to fix their kid, I can very gently start working with them, because there's nothing wrong with the child. It's like, if we start doing things differently, our children will fall in line and do things differently as well.
Yeah, look, that is an awesome superpower. And I wish we could do that for everyone in the world.
Everybody.
There is, I think then we would be a more peaceful, more
for sure
more huggy world.
Yes.
I think we need to do more hugging and more listening,
more hugging
and less talking, which is typical, because I don't shut up. But no, that's brilliant. Look, thank you so much. It's evening where you are and morning where I am. So thank you for coming and talking to us your evening time. I hope it's not too late where you are. And look, thank you for coming and joining us and telling us all about everything. I'll post the links and everything to your website in the podcast blurb.
Thank you.
Attaches to this. And awesome. Thanks. Hope you have a good rest of your evening.
Take care of yourself.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you'd like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family on all the usual social media platforms that you're normally on. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content that I know you're going to want to hear, like this. If you want to check out past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. Have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one's perfect, and we're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single, and Human podcast.